This week, we've got an all-new segment with Brother Mark St. Cyr, Education Application. In it, Mark talks about the single thing that Masonry seems to have a problem with. I don't want to give too much away here, but I think he's right on the money, and it has to do with how we treat our obligation to the craft and how we live our lives. Then, we're going to dive into the world of Hermeticism with a piece that talks about the general overview of the secrets of Hermetic living or Hermeticism. And then we'll discuss a little bit about that famed character, Hermes Trismegistus. Who is this guy? Or guys? And is he really 3 times great? Well, we'll let you decide. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 605. I want to thank our contributors, fellows, and producers, as well as our legacy partners of the WCY podcast, who make it possible to make this show each and every week available for anyone interested in Freemasonry or the Royal Art. As a contributor, you get your name on the website. As a fellow, you get that, and I will send you a personalized thank you card. As a producer, I will do both of those things, plus I will send you a producer's pin. And at the legacy partner level, once a year, annually, you and I will work together on producing an episode of your choosing. You pick the content, you pick what we're going to discuss, and we make it happen. For all this information and even more, head on over to wcypodcast.com and click on Support the Show to see all the details. We also have a shop, a bookstore, as well as many other projects such as Skull and Crown Limited that all go back to funding this program. Thanks again for checking it out. In the news, on the 19th of August, I will be at the John Skeen Celebration event, which is taking place on Saturday, August 19th, and it starts at 9:30 a.m., and it's a memorial event in honor of John Skeen at his burial site at Peachfield, Westampton, New Jersey. The event is held in a commemoration of John Skeen, the first known Freemason in the New World who settled in West Jersey at the end of the 17th century, along with a memorial service held at Peachfield, his plantation home outside of Burlington, New Jersey, where he's buried. The conference aims to serve as a venue for research and a convention on the broader historical role of Freemasonry. Our 2023 theme is Scottish Origins and Influences, and revolves around the role of Scottish immigration and imagination in forming the prehistory of Freemasonry. We will feature presentations from several renowned Masonic researchers, including Robert L.D. Cooper, Curator Emeritus of the Grand Lodge of Scotland Museum and Library. And this is in large part possible due to the sponsor Eclipse Lodge number 67 F&AM. Now, the tickets are available. You can click the link on our website under the presentation schedule. And I will be speaking at the festive board later that evening. The following weekend, I will be in New Hampshire for Ancient York's 9th evening of Masonic Light, featuring perspectives from the brothers of the Masonic Roundtable. There will be a social hour that begins at about 5:30 with dinner at 6:30. And then, of course, Brother John Ruark, Jason Richards, Joe Martinez, and myself will bring our quote-unquote wealth of Masonic knowledge and insight to everyone there in a night that promises to be one to remember. Each brother will be presenting a myriad of topics in their lodge session, and after lodge closes, they'll continue the discussion through the social hour, and then have an agape-style multi-course meal, at which they will have a panel discussion with all 4 of the TMR hosts. So we'll be there as well. It's going to be an awesome evening. And then, of course, Masonicon Chicago. This is happening on September 16th. However, we had such a great turnout of interest for this event that we actually started to think about doing something on Friday night as well. And so we scheduled it. That's right, so if you get your ticket right now to Masonicon Chicago, you'll actually enjoy not 7, but 9 speakers over 2 days. Friday night, we're going to do an impromptu sort of pizza party with a couple of presentations by a couple guys you might know, Brother James Buckhorn and Brother Stephen L. Harrison. It kind of doesn't get better than that, but it does, because then the following day, we've got 7 more speakers. Who are these speakers? Well, we've got Michael Jarzabek, past Junior Grand Warden and Chairman of the Masonic Education at the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. In fact, what's he going to be talking about? Well, his reveal was probably just launched to everyone this morning, if you're listening on Monday, August 7th. We'll be revealing topics for each one of our 2023 speakers over the next 9 days. And if you forgot who our speakers are, well, we've also got Joe Martinez, Chad Kopensky, Robert William Marshall, Spencer Hammond, Darren Lainers, James E. Fry, and again, Stephen L. Harrison and James Buckhorn. People are coming from all over, from as far as Washington on the West Coast to the southern tip of Florida, all the way over into Virginia and South Carolina. It'll be a wonderful time. There are a couple of hotels that are very close, very affordable. We've got a Holiday Inn Express and a Sonesta. If you want to get on the mailing list and hear these things and get them in your inbox every single day we announce something, then be sure to go to Masonicon Chicago and get on the mailing list. You can also become a sponsor of the conference, which again is being sponsored by 3 organizations so far. The largest, of course, is Space Novum Lodge, number 1183. And this year, this conference, and probably going forward, really belongs to the lodge. We're very excited as a lodge to be able to do this because people have been asking. Of course, WCY Media and the WCY Podcast are both sponsors of this as well. We are going to have Silas H. Shepard, Lodge of Research, in attendance, as well as the Lakes Chapter, de Malay, the Sharks, will be there. And we've got apparel coming from 3 Knox Apparel, coming all the way from Massachusetts to be there. If you've got questions, you can reach out. Some folks have asked for a schedule. We'll post that as soon as possible. But as of right now, on Friday night, we're looking at 5 p.m. Doors will open. For some early registration, we'll have pizza about 5:30. Then we'll have a couple of presenters, of course, James Buckhorn and Steve Harrison, over a couple hours. And then 8 o'clock, we will break for some drinks at a local establishment. Saturday, we will start the day off at 8 a.m. From 8 to 8:15, we'll have some welcome messaging. If you want to skip out on that, that's fine with me. Just make sure you know where the bathrooms are. We've got Chad Kopensky starting it off first thing in the morning at 8:15. We'll have Joe Martinez taking the stage at 9:30, Spencer Hammond at 10:30. Then we'll have a break. We've got Darren Lainers hopping on at 11:45. Then we've got a lunch break, about an hour and a half. Then we have Robert Marshall hitting the stage at 2:15, followed by James Fry at 3:30, and closing it out at 4:45, Mike Jarzabek. And closing remarks happening at about 5:45 that day. In terms of lunches, you're on your own. There are 36 plus restaurants in the local area. A lot of great places to go, and with an hour and a half for lunch, you'll have all the time you need. And of course, we're going to be wrapping up early enough for you guys to get together in groups and decide where you want to go for dinner, and we'll be able to mingle and do all of that, and everybody travels home on Sunday. So we'll make sure we get this schedule here posted on the website very soon. And again, head on over to MasoniconChicago.com to get your tickets. Again, Space Novum's Masonicon Chicago, September 16th. Technically September 15th and 16th, 2023. The first piece I wanted to give you this week is actually a brand new segment for the show. In my time as the managing editor over at the Midnight Freemasons, it has been my honor and privilege to publish some of the greatest Masonic minds over the last 10, 12 years, whatever it's been. When I passed the torch on to the great worshipful brother Darren A. Lainers, who does a fantastic job over there, all of the relationships I've had with these brothers over time have just been built up. One such relationship is with Brother Mark St. Cyr. He has a world of expertise in the business side of things, and he brings a very unique and powerful message to Freemasonry. He is a brother out of Ohio. He's written several articles and continues to write for the Midnight Freemasons. He's very active in Freemasonry in what he does. And so he came to me and he said, what about a new segment on the show centered around the application of education with his specific expertise in mind? And I thought this would be absolutely amazing. So we're going to get right into the first episode of this. I think you're going to love it. Let's dig in.
For the Whence Came You podcast, I'm Mark St. Cyr with this week's first installment of a new series called Education Application. Under the direction of Brother Johnson, the reason for its creation is to give real-world, real-time application processes for you to use not only in your lodge setting, but many will be applicable in your own business and or personal life. Now, since this is the inaugural episode, let me make the following points abundantly clear. First, a disclaimer. This does not reflect any endorsement, nor should any be inferred of any Grand Lodge or concordant body. Please refer to your jurisdiction's rules for governance before considering any application of what follows. Let me explain why. This is not some cookie-cutter recital of some varying methodologies culled from so-called management guru books. Next, hard issues that need to be addressed won't be sugar-coated. That's what's been transpiring within the craft for decades, and the results speak for themselves. Actually, they're screaming. What will be dispensed here are real-world solutions for application in quick and easy-to-understand scenarios. They'll be delivered by me, off the cuff, and extemporaneous in nature. I also feel this point needs to be made clear. I'm also not here to make friends. I'm here to provoke thought. The former takes place in the lodge room. The latter will take place here. So with that all said, now comes the obvious. Why should you listen, and who the heck is this guy anyways? It's a fair question. So let me answer it this way. I'm someone who spent the last 2 decades at the forefront of what's known as thought leadership in the world of business and financial thought. Now I'm fully aware, and I'm quite sure there'll be a lot of you that will try and find fault with my arguments, give knee-jerk reactions in the vein of, but that won't work here, and more, and trust me, I get it. However, here's how I'll counter, and you can think of it for yourself, and as to not whether you're going to just listen, apply, or just throw it all to the side. But here's that point that I'd like you to consider. A few years back, one of the top business financial news outlets wanted to know the prospects for both the U.S. economy and its largest company, known as Apple. They asked and quoted Warren Buffett for his thoughts. When they wanted for that same article a viewpoint on the merits or prospects of Mr. Buffett's thoughts, they quoted me. That's not bragging. It's just making a point for clarity that I may know just a bit of what I speak. What you take away going forward is totally up to you, as it should be. But at least now you have a metric as to judge credibility. So with that out of the way, here's the first installment for this week. Here's what I believe is the true existential crisis facing Freemasonry today. No one wants your hobby. It is this proposed argument that is completely undermining both the craft itself as well as any attempts to both shore up membership as well as keeping those remaining engaged. But it can't see it. And even if it did, it doesn't want to come to grips with it. And the numbers prove it. And it will continue to get worse no matter what the craft employs going forward to try and remedy it. Repeat, no matter what. Let me explain. What most don't fully grasp when trying to invoke change into any structure of business is that there's usually about a dozen varying issues that make up the substance of any and all problems that cripple any organization. Anyone on its own could be self-sufficient to do just that, but usually it's never a solo act. Usually some combination of one or two is at play at any given time. Yet in severe cases, yes, all of them can be present. Identifying this dozen and then remediating them is one thing, but most can't. Which is why you see so many once heralded institutions crumble into oblivion right after the so-called management guru consultant class leaves the building declaring, "Problem solved. Checks please." Or said differently, their told and sold methodology presentations never seem to work out in the final analysis. That's because they apply some latest and greatest cookie-cutter approach that was that period's buzz phrase. Left brain, right brain, anyone? This usually occurs because some HR department was tasked with hire a consultant to fix X. And because some other HR department they're friendly with in some other company was wowed by it, well then they're going to be wowed also, they believe. Regardless if it solved anything or not for the original buyer. Why? Well, it's because processes or programs like this get brought in because the boss said get something. So they did just that. Said differently, here's something. Box checked. This is standard fulfillment practices, not efficacy. Don't take my word on this. Just look at all the companies or institutions that were once stalwarts of both mind share or market value that are now gone. Again, right after the so-called consultants left the building. Sears, anyone? Back to that dozen I spoke of prior. And no, I'm not going to list them out, but thanks for asking. First and foremost, you must start with figuring out what is the number one issue having the most dramatic effect across all aspects of not only affecting the public at large or its customer base, but also the very people contained within it. In other words, if the one where it's the singular issue, if not corrected first and foremost, all else will devolve into futility, as in everything and anything following, also known as fixing, is nothing more than tidying up around the edges and will, sooner or later, and it's usually sooner, allow the same problems to manifest, only the next time they happen in magnitudes higher than the previous. This is why you hear things like, "I thought they were just getting their act together." Then, they're gone entirely before the ink's dried on the new management business cards. Again, you've seen it everywhere in your daily life, where some of the greatest brands were once thought to possess unshakable customer bases for loyalty and more are now gone or still dying. Forget Sears. How's Craftsman doing these days? Or should I say, what's a craftsman? So now what does my original argument about hobby actually mean? It's a great question. Here's the thing. It means everything. Remember what I said about there's only a dozen core issues and the importance of which one at what time for remediation is paramount. So what's the one for the craft, do I believe? It's this: culture. Until the culture changes within the craft and realigns with what the raison d'etre, once again, no amount of strategy sessions or differing tactical measures are going to amount to anything lasting. And this is why all the committee meetings dispensing thought-through plans and worthy programs work only around the edges and for a limited time. Then they just seem to succumb to what came before, which is stagnation into entropy. But why? Because culture eats strategy and tactics for breakfast. It's that simple. You've heard it before, but it really is that simple. You can implement any newfangled idea or management principle you want. It won't move the needle in the bigger picture. It might appear as if, but it'll be an illusion or an aberration in the larger context. The culture within the organization will do anything and everything to keep doing what it was doing prior as to not change. Again, a lot of these questions, why? Because deep down it doesn't want to. It's far easier to complain than change, and what's past is all it knows. And it's also all it wants to know, no matter how much it argues to the contrary. Even if the entity is sinking into oblivion, they will argue that things have to change, but will never be a force or go along with that change until their employment itself changes. And if that happens, well, they'll just complain to anyone that will listen at the new place if only they had listened to me. is far too common. For the craft, its culture today exemplifies the following. Far too often, people treat their obligations to the craft proper, as well as their relation to it, via their obligations to their respective lodges, as a hobby, rather than what it was constructed to be from its founding, which is a transformative way of life, sacred in its institution and instructions, as well as its commitment to it. Today, more people treat the craft as their thing, and has more in common with the way they treat their hobby of choice, rather than the commitment one makes to something that is a way of life, and in many respects, and sometimes far more, sacrosanct. Let me explain or leave you with this thought experiment before I go into any specific examples, which will do exactly that in subsequent episodes. Are you ready? Here we go. Your boss, yes, the one who's in charge of whether or not you get paid. Your boss asks you a week beforehand that they want you and only you to pick them up at the airport at 4 o'clock that following Thursday. They make explicit to you you're the only one they trust to be responsible to do so. And you agree. However, when that Thursday comes, you suddenly realize you had a prior engagement or an appointment somewhere else. But what do? Do you A, cancel and make arrangements with the forgotten task, no matter what the consequences are, and fulfill the obligation you made to your boss? Or do you B, fulfill the forgotten task and beg, your boss the forgiveness for leaving them stuck at the airport and needing to find their own ride home? I think it's fair to guess most of you agree with the first is the obvious path. The problem is, in practice, the latter is how most apply their resolve to the craft. I'll give specific examples next time we meet. So until then, I'm Mark St. Cyr with this week's episode of Education Application for the Whence podcast. See you then.
All right, how about that? Something that became abundantly clear within this piece from Mark St. Cyr is when he says, we do all these great things and they're only affecting things sort of on the periphery. And I have felt this, you guys. I have been a part of Masonic things that we've launched programs, we've pushed out all kinds of stuff, and we get this great feel good, and we push it out over all of the things, whether it's email, print, everything, and yet it really only affects the periphery of the craft. Why? And Mark hits it on the head. We've got a culture of wanting change, but really not wanting it enough to practice it. How can we fix this? And this really just struck a nerve with me. And so I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And I'm really looking forward to future editions of this particular segment. So our thanks goes out to Brother Mark St. Cyr for his great work and for sharing expertise in something that for many, many people seems to be something that is outside of the way we normally think about things. We're just sort of passive in the way things work. We work in business, we work in sales, we work as mechanics and in the trades, and we're doing all this cool stuff, but we're not always, some of us do, but we're not always thinking in terms of this large-scale corporate mindset, in particular in how we look at those successes and why they won't work for Freemasonry. That's how we always approach it. Let me tell you why that won't work. That's how we lead. Because somehow, if Grand Lodge doesn't come up with it, forget about it. Or maybe they are taking on some of these ad agencies. But I think listening here to Mark St. Cyr will make a real difference. I'm looking forward again to future segments. Let me know what you all think in the Craftsman Plus Facebook group, on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever. Let's have a great conversation. The other piece of education I wanted to focus on this week was something that came across, tagged under esotericism, and it was by MPS writer Joe. And this was published on May 8th, 2023 for the philosophicalsociety.org, which is a wonderful organization that writes profound things by profound folks. And this particular article is called Unlocking the Secrets of Hermeticism, a Journey into the Mystical Tradition. Here we go. Are you fascinated by ancient spiritual traditions and mystical teachings? Look no further than Hermeticism. This ancient philosophy, based on the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, has captivated seekers of spiritual knowledge for centuries. In this article, we'll delve into the mysterious world of Hermeticism and explore its teachings on the nature of reality, the interconnectedness of all things, and the secrets of the universe. So get ready to unlock the secrets of this mythical tradition. What is Hermeticism? Hermeticism is a spiritual tradition that originated in ancient Egypt and was later influenced by Greek philosophy. The central teachings of Hermeticism are based on the writings attributed to the mythical figure of Hermes Trismegistus, which were said to contain secret knowledge about the nature of the universe and the human soul. At its core, Hermeticism is a system of spiritual and philosophical beliefs that emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things, and the idea that humans have the potential to transcend their physical bodies and achieve spiritual enlightenment. Hermeticism also places a strong emphasis on the use of symbolism and metaphor as a way of conveying complex spiritual concepts. Hermeticism has been associated with various practices through history, including alchemy, astrology, and magic. However, these practices are often viewed as tools for spiritual growth and transformation rather than ends in themselves. Who was Hermes Trismegistus? Well, Hermes Trismegistus is a legendary figure who is believed to have lived in ancient Egypt during the time of the pharaohs. He is often called the thrice great Hermes because of his reputation as sage, philosopher, and teacher. According to legend, Hermes Trismegistus was the author of a series of texts known as the Hermetica, which contained secret knowledge about the nature of the universe and the human soul. These texts were said to have been written as dialogues between Hermes and his disciples and were passed down through the ages by a secret society of initiates. In addition to his writings, Hermes Trismegistus, who also associated alchemy and astrology, he was often depicted as a god or a divine messenger, and his teachings were considered a source of spiritual guidance and enlightenment. While there is some debate among scholars about the historical existence of Hermes Trismegistus, his influence on spiritual and philosophical thought cannot be denied. Several spiritual traditions, including Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism, were influenced by these teachings. What do Hermetics believe? Hermeticism is a complex spiritual and philosophical tradition encompassing a wide range of beliefs and practices. Here are some of the key concepts and ideas of Hermeticism. 1. Ultimate reality. Hermetics believe the ultimate reality is an infinite and eternal divine presence permeating all things. This divine presence is often called the All or the One. 2. As above, so below. Hermetics believe in the principle of correspondence, which states that there is a correspondence between the microcosm, the individual, and the macrocosm, the universe. In other words, the same patterns and laws that govern the universe also govern the human psyche. 3. Reincarnation. Hermetics believe in the concept of reincarnation, which holds that the soul is eternal and that it passes through many lifetimes in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment. 4. Morality. Hermetics strongly emphasize the moral and ethical behavior to achieve spiritual growth and enlightenment. They believe that the individual is responsible for living in harmony with the divine presence and working towards the betterment of all beings. In addition to these core beliefs, Hermeticism also incorporates various practices and disciplines, including meditation, ritual, alchemy, and astrology. These practices are viewed as tools for spiritual growth and transformation, and are often used in conjunction with the study of Hermetic philosophy. One of the critical teachings of Hermeticism is the idea that humans have the potential to achieve spiritual enlightenment and transcend their physical bodies. This idea has inspired innumerable spiritual seekers throughout history and continue to be a central focus of the Hermetic tradition today. Final thoughts. Hermeticism is a fascinating and complex spiritual tradition that has profoundly influenced many other spiritual and philosophical beliefs throughout history. Its teachings on the interconnectedness of all things, the nature of reality, and the potential for spiritual enlightenment continue to inspire and captivate spiritual seekers today. Whether you're drawn to Hermeticism for its mystical teachings, its emphasis on moral and ethical behavior, or its practical tools for spiritual growth and transformation, there's no denying the enduring legacy of this ancient tradition. So if you're ready to unlock the secrets of the Hermetic tradition, dive in and explore the mysteries of the universe. This was a cool little piece, and I think it serves to sort of invite those who might have some questions about the practice to learn more. I did find a couple points in this that I might take issue with. For instance, Hermes Trismegistus, or Trismegistes, is actually an amalgamation of 3 separate people. Primarily, it is looked at as an Egyptian god. It's also the Greek name, which is applied to the Egyptian god Thoth, or Jehuti. It's the reputed author of those, again, Hermetic writings, which are works of revelation on occult subjects and theology. Now, we also should say here, there's a bit here from the Encyclopedia Britannica that I think is important to read, which is that Thoth is the scribe of the gods, the inventor of writing, and the patron of all the arts dependent on writing, including medicine, astronomy, and magic. And at least as early as Herodotus, Greeks had identified him with their god Hermes. And by the 3rd century BCE, the identification was official. On the Rosetta Stone, which is 196 BCE, Hermes the Great is evidently Thoth. The epithet of Trismegistus, or the Greek thrice greatest, occurs only rarely outside the Hermetic texts. It represents the development from Egyptian, the great, that is, greatest, which is found as an epithet of Thoth in the late hieroglyphics. Now, the writings associated to Hermes or Thoth fall into 2 main classes. Popular Hermeticism dealt with astrology and the other occult sciences, and learned Hermeticism, which concerned itself with theology and philosophy. And from the Renaissance until the end of the 19th century, there's little attention that's paid to the popular Hermetic literature. More recent studies have shown that its development preceded that of the learned Hermeticism, and that it reflects ideas and beliefs that were widely held in the early Roman Empire and are therefore significant for the religious and intellectual history of the time. Now, in the Hellenistic age, it was chiefly works on astrology which were ascribed to Hermes, and to these were later added the treatises on medicine, alchemy, and magic. The concept which underlines astrology, that the cosmos constitutes a unity and that all parts of it are interdependent, is basic also to the other pseudosciences. To make this principle effective in practice, and Hermetic science, unlike Aristotelianism, is intensely utilitarian. It was necessary to know the laws of sympathy and antipathy by which the parts of the universe were related. And since these assumed affinities did not in fact exist, and hence could not be discovered by ordinary scientific methods, recourse was had to divine revelation. This is growing distrust of traditional Greek rationalism and a breaking down of the distinction between science and religion. Hermes Thoth was but one, if perhaps the most important, of the gods and prophets, chiefly of Middle Eastern origin, to whom these knowledge seekers turned for divinely revealed wisdom. The theological writings are represented chiefly by the 17 treatises of the Corpus Hermeticum, by extensive fragments in Stobaeus, and by Latin translations of the Asclepius preserved among the works of Apuleius. These date probably from the first 3 centuries of the Common Era. All are marked by a sincere piety of a mystical type, but there's no single doctrine which is consistently set forth, and it's unlikely that there was any well-defined Hermetic community or church. Though the setting is Egyptian, the philosophy, like the language, is Greek. Hermeticism was extensively cultivated by the Arabs, and through them it reached and influenced such men as Albertus Magnus in the West, who of course is the guy who Thomas Aquinas looks up to, and there are frequent allusions to Hermes Trismegistus in the late medieval and Renaissance literature. That's it for this week. I hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back next week with more education and to dive in even deeper into some great Masonic and quasi-Masonic stuff. Until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
Thank you.